Hello, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Jacobs, and today I will be showing you lesson 8.2, which is standard 4NF 4B, which is part of multiplying a whole number by a fraction. This is the second lesson. In this lesson, you should be able to write a fraction as a product of a whole number and a fraction. So the difference between 8.1 and 8.2 is 8.1 said that you had to write a fraction as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. Today, the only difference is we're not doing it as a whole number and a unit fraction. We will be doing today's lesson as a whole number and a fraction. So we will be successful by doing the following criteria. First, I can multiply a whole number and a unit fraction, which was yesterday's lesson, lesson 8.1. I can use a number line to write multiples, which was also a part of yesterday. So we had to write multiples of unit fractions. And obviously today we're going to use yesterday's lesson. So we're bringing to the table our knowledge from yesterday's lesson because that's going to help you with today's lesson. Okay. And then you would be able to write and represent multiples of a whole number and a fraction. Okay. So basically all this success criteria is from 8.1. So let's start by getting our brains going and thinking. And before we start, I want to look at a few questions and to see how we can justify and prove our answers. So look at the equation below. Do you agree or disagree with this equation? Explain. Okay, so looking at this equation, I see 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3 times 1/4. So we have to decide first if you agree or disagree with that. But before we do, and I see a spelling error here with disagree. So before we start, okay, our lesson, okay, before we begin, let's just think if you agree or disagree, but we have to show work first, right? So I am thinking, it says justify and prove it using visual representations. So here is where we would draw some models, right? So 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So I'm going to model that, right? And I'm going to cut my models into fourths. And then I'm going to shade in, oops, sorry, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. And I can tell by looking at this model, okay, that 1/4 plus 1/4 equals, and now I'm just going to draw another model to show you that when I put all those 1/4 together, or I combine them, I will get 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4, plus another one is 3/4. So 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. So I'm going to write that, right? And now I have to see if 3/4 is equal to 3 times 1/4. So I am going to write 3/4 as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So I am actually adding 1/4 3 times. So from yesterday's lesson, this would be 3 times 1/4. Yes, I agree with this equation because 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. And then I can write 3/4 as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction as 3 times 1/4. Look at the equation below. Do you agree or disagree? There goes that spelling error again. With this equation, explain. Okay, so 4 times 1/4, we're saying that that is the same or equal to, has the same value as 4 and 1/4. So first of all, this is a product of a whole number and a unit fraction, but this side is a mixed number. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I am going to look at this side of the equation. Okay, and 4 times 1/3. So 4 times 1/3 is really saying 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, which equals 4/3. Now, if I was to draw, right, what 4/3, right, and I know that 4 times 1/3 equals 4/3. But let's say I needed to draw a visual, right? So I am going to draw if I was to combine 1/3 4 times, what would it look like, right? So I am going to then show you, right? So I'm going to do 1/3, this is 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, right? And remember that 4/3 is a fraction greater than 1/2, or AKA improper fraction. But looking at my model, I could say that 4/3 is equal to 1 and 1/3, right? That's my mixed number. So this side of the equation is 4/3, but also as a mixed number is 1 and 1/3. However, on the other side, it says 4 and 1/3. Now, I already disagree then with this equation because I do not agree with the whole number. That whole number should be 1. Because if I was to draw a visual, we could see what 4 and 1/3 looks like. 4 wholes and 1/3 of another, right? So remember 4 wholes, so this is 1 whole, 2 wholes, 3 wholes, 4 wholes, and then 1/3 of another. So we can really see also that 1 and 1/3 is not equal to 4 and 1/3. So many children have this misconception because they see 4, 4, 1/3, 1/3, that they automatically think that they're equal. But we have to pay attention to what each side of the equal sign, what its value is, what it's actually worth. So you have to really do the work on both sides to make sure you can determine if they're equivalent or equal. All right, so let's review yesterday's lesson just to make sure, because that was part of our success criteria. To be successful today, we have to bring to the table our knowledge from yesterday's lesson. So just let's do a quick review of lesson 8.1. So write the first 4 multiples of 1/3. So the first 4, so I'm going to start with 1/3, and I only need the first 4. This says 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3. That's the first 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first 4 multiples of 1/3. Remember, multiples are skip counting. Skip counting is like adding, so it creates a pattern in the list. So since we're counting by 1/3, every time we go to the next multiple, we're adding another 1/3. Write the fractions below as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So remember 7/12 is really 1/12 7 times, right? That's the unit fraction, right? The unit fraction is 1/12, but we are doing that 7 times. Oops, 1/12. Okay. 9/10 is really saying that I'm adding 1/10, but I am doing that 9 times. That is a review of lesson 8.1. So how is that going to help us today? Okay, so we're going to look at multiples today, but the multiples are not going to be of unit fractions, okay? They're going to be multiples of fractions. So if we look here in this example, we have multiples of 2/5. So that means we're going to skip count by 2/5 at a time, okay? So every time we go to the next fraction in the list, we have to add another 2/5. So let me show you on this number line, okay, we always start at 0. And look how it goes here, it goes 2/5 because that's what we're counting by. We have to go 2/5 at a time. So we have 2/5 once, 2/5 twice is 4/5, 2/5 3 times is 6/5, 2/5 4 times is 8/5, and then 2/5 5 times is 10/5. So the multiples of 2/5 are 2/5, 4/5, 6/5, 8/5, and 10/5. So as you could see, really the numerator is skip counting by 2. So now we can write 3 times 2/5. So this is a whole number, but this is not a unit fraction. This is a fraction. But notice how 3 times 2/5 really means add 2/5 3 times. So 2/5 3 times is 2/5 plus 2/5 plus 2/5 obviously equals 6/5. Okay, so how do we show that on a number line? We're going to do 2/5 at a time, but we're going to do 3 hops 3 times. So this is 2/5 once, 2/5 twice, 2/5 3 times. So how do we write 3 times 2/5 equals 6/5? Now what we have to do is now do yesterday's lesson. So we actually multiply 3 times 2/5, get 6/5, but now we have to write this fraction as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So this is yesterday's lesson. So it's 6 times 1/5. Okay, so let's jump into practicing doing multiples of fractions. Okay, so list 3 multiples of 3/8. So we're going to start with 3/8. And now remember, when we get this next fraction, we have to add another 3/8. That's what skip counting and multiples are. So this would be 6/8. Then another 3/8 would be 9/8. Okay? So now we're going to use a number line to write the multiples of 3/8. Okay, so first I have to create my number line, which is going to start at 0. And I know that I have to go past 1 whole because 9/8 is a fraction that's greater than 1. So I am going to put 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8, 9/8. So now I have my fractions, right, on my number line. Now I can show you how I skip count. And I am going to use a different color. So remember, it's multiples of 3/8. So I have to do 3/8 at a time. So I'm going to start at 0 and I go to 3/8. That's once, 3/8 twice, 3/8 three times. So really this shows me 3 times 3/8, which is 9/8. However, now today we have to take this and use yesterday's lesson and write 9/8 as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction, which is 9 times 1/8. So really what we're getting at here is that 3 times 3/8 is equal to 9 times 1/8. Now, think about it. This side equals 9/8, and this side also equals 9/8. So they are equivalent, right? So this is today's lesson. We are taking a whole number, multiplying it by a fraction, but then we're going to write it as a whole number and a unit fraction, right? Okay, so list the first 5 multiples of 2/5. So we have 2/5, another 2/5 is 4/5, 6/5, 8/5, 10/5. So this really, when I'm listing the multiples of 2/5, doing it 5 times, I'm really doing 5 times 2/5. This equals 10/5. And then that's today's lesson. But then we have to write this product, right, as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction, which is yesterday's lesson 8.1, which is 10 times 1/5. Okay, so let's take a look at the number line. So I'm going to put my fractions on the number line: 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5, 6/5, 7/5, 8/5, 9/5, 10/5, right? Now I'm going to move on this number line. Excuse me. I am going to show the multiples of 2/5 5 times. So I have 2/5 once, 2/5 twice, 2/5 3 times, 2/5 4 times, 2/5 5 times. So really, this point here, right, is is 1 times, oops, that should be a 5. I know my 5s are looking like 6s. 1 times 2/5. This is 2 times 2/5. This is 3 times 2/5. This is 4 times 2/5. This is 5 times 2/5. Okay? All right. So let's move on. That is multiples, right? So now, today, we have to be able to solve these, right? And then write the product as the product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So first we'll have to find the product. Then after I find the product, I have to make it as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So watch me. So first I have to find the product, okay? So, sorry. So 2 times 5/8 is 10/8 because I'm doing 5/8 twice. So it's really 5/8 plus 5/8, which is 10/8. Okay. Now that is this part. So that part is done. But now I have to do this part of it. We can't forget that. Now we have to turn this and make this a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So that is 10 times 1/8, right? Because 10/8 is 1/8 10 times. So therefore, 2 times 5/8 is equal to 10 times 1/8. Okay? All right, number 2. That keeps happening, I'm sorry. 4 times 3/5 is 3/5 4 times. So 3/5, 6/5, 9/5, 12/5. 12/5. Now I have to write that as a product of a whole number and unit fraction. So 12/5 is 1/5 12 times. So 4 times 3/5 equals 12 times 1/5. Write the product as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So we're going to show you how to represent this on a number line. Okay, so we have 4 times 2 6. That means I'm going to do 2 6 4 times, which would give me 8 6, right? And then 8 6 is equal to 8 times 1 6, right? All right, so let's show it on our number line. 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6, or 1 whole, 7/6, 8/6. Okay, so now I am going to show the multiples, right, on here to help me. So I'm going to do 2 6 once, 2 6 2 times. So that's 2 times 2 6. This is 3 times 2 6. This is 4 times 2 6. Okay. So this is showing that 4 times 2 6, right, is equal to 8 6. Now, you know that this is a fraction greater than 1, right? So we know this is 1 whole, this is 1 and 1 6, this is 1 and 2 6. So keep that in mind, how also improper fractions, what they are equal to as a mixed number. Show the product of 4 times 2 6 using a different model. So what I'm going to do is draw um, rectangular models, okay? So I have to show 4 times 2 6. So I'm going to draw 4 models, right? Because 4. I'm going to draw 2 6 4 times. So that's why I have to represent. Okay, now I have to make sure that I represent 2 6. So 2 6 1 time, 2 6 2 times, 2 6 3 times, 2 6 4 times. Okay, and now I can see 2 6 4 times is 2 6 2 6 2 6 2 6 is 8 6 if I was to go combine them, right? So if I was to add these up, I would get 8 6. Okay, so this is your Go Math book, page 464. This is part of the share and show. So please make sure that you do these examples with me so that you have a better understanding of today's lesson. Okay, so it says list the next 4 multiples. So we already have the first one, but we want the next 4. That's why there's 4 blanks. So remember, we're skip counting by 3 6 at a time. So it's 3 6 plus 3 6 is 6 6. Another 3 6, 9 6, 12 6, 15 6. Remember, the denominators are staying the same because this is addition of fractions. And when the denominators are the same, it remains the same. We're actually just adding the numerators, right? So here, 2 tenths, 4 tenths, 6 tenths, 8 tenths, 10/10. Right? Write the product as the product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So first we have to find the product. So 3 times 3/4 is 9/4. But then we have to write that product as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So 9/4 is really 1/4 9 times. This makes the complete answer. Okay, you have to have both. Now we're going to do 2 times 4/6 is 8/6. But now 8/6 as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction is 8 times 1/6. So now I would like you to pause the video and try to do these on your own. So this page, this all the way up to question 13. So I would like you to do 6 to 13 by yourself, pause the video, really try to do these on your own. And then when you are done, unpause the video and watch me as I show you the answers to really assess yourself and assess your understanding of today's concepts. Okay, so you can pause. Okay, welcome back. And now I will show you how to answer these so you could check for understanding. Okay, let's start at number 6. List the next 4 multiples of the fraction. So 4/5, 8/5, 12/5, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 20/5. 2/4, 4/4, 6/4, 8/4, 10/4. Right? Write the product as the product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So first I have to find the product, which is 8/8. Then I have to write that as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So 8/8 is 1/8 8 times. So 8 times 1/8. That is the complete answer. 3 times 3/5 is 9/5. 9/5 written as a product of a whole number and a unit fraction is 1/5 9 times. Use repeated reasoning. Are 6/10 and 6/30 multiples of 3/10? So first of all, if I'm trying to determine if a fraction is a multiple of another, I actually have to show the multiples of 3/10 to be able to give reasoning and proof. So I'm going to start with 3/10 over here. And if I do the multiples of 3/10, I get 6/10, 9/10. Oh, okay. So looking at this, I could tell you that 6/10 is definitely a multiple. It's right here. However, 6/30 isn't because when we are doing multiples in tenths, it has to remain in tenths. Explain. 6/10 is a multiple. However, 6/30 is not because the denominator has to remain tenths. Has to remain in tenths. Which is greater, 4 times 2/7 or 3 times 3/7? Well, in order to do this, you have to find out their products, right? So 4 times 2/7 is 8/7, and 3 times 3/7 is 9/7. So sevenths. So we can see that 8/7 is less than 9/7. But when you're explaining this, you would say, first I found the product of 4 times 2/7, which is 8/7. Then I found the product of 3 times 3/7, which is 9/7. And 8/7 is less than 9/7. So, therefore, 4 times 2/7 is less than 3 times 3/7. Okay, unlock the problem. Josh is watering his plants. He gives each of 2 plants 3/5 pints of water. His watering can holds 1/5 pint. How many times will he fill his watering can to water both plants? What do you need to find out? You need to find out how many times he needs to fill that watering can. What information do you need? Well, you know there's 2 plants that require 3/5 of water each. However, his can only holds 1/5. Okay. So how can drawer model help you to solve this? Well, you could actually show the 3/5 2 times, right? Now I'm going to use a rectangular model. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have the 2 plants here, right? And we are going to each plant 3/5. So now we know that that is 6/5. So 2 times 3/5 equals 6/5, right? So that would be my step 1. 2 times 3/5 equals 6/5. But now it his can only holds 1/5. So I need to get up to 6/5. So really, if I could do 1/5 at a time, that's 1/5 once, twice. I have to get up to 6/5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically, he would need to fill up this watering can 6 times. Okay, because 6/5 equals 6 times 1/5. So here's why 6 times. And starter. Alma is making 3 batches of tortillas. She adds 3/4 cup of water to each batch. The measuring cup holds 1/4. How many times must Alma measure 1/4 cup of water to have enough for the tortillas? Shade the model to show your answer. Well, first of all, I'm going to write my equation. We're doing 3 times 3/4, which equals 9/4. Okay, so she needs a total of 9/4. So if I'm going to shade the model, she needs 9/4. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4, 9/4. Okay, so basically she has to do the 1/4 one time, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. 9 times. Reasoning is because 9/4 is 9 times 1/4, which leads us back to today's lesson. So thank you for joining me and have a great day.